to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the English with Kirsty podcast. And today I'm going to talk about something that we touched on last time, that you can use podcasts as a way of learning wherever you are, particularly on the way to work. That's one of the points I made last time, and it's something that I used to do because now working for myself as an English teacher, I don't have a long journey to work, and I'm really pleased about that because when I lived in London I had a 3-hour commute each day, so 1.5 hours there and 1.5 hours back. And that was if everything was going well. If there were train cancellations or delays, it was even longer. So for me, it was important to do something useful with that time because that's 3 hours out of your day, and you don't just want to be sitting around and wasting them. So part of the time that I was travelling was walking, and it's a personal preference, but I don't like to be listening to anything else while I'm walking along. I don't want to be shutting myself off from the rest of what's going on around me. But part of the journey was also a train journey, so 45 minutes each way, that's 1.5 hours of time. I wanted to use them for something useful, and I used to listen to a lot of podcasts actually. That was my podcast time. Maybe take a nice coffee with me and listen to podcasts. And I started talking to some of my students about this because in London it's quite normal that you have a long journey to work. In other parts of the country less so, and I started to find out what my students did and whether they used any of this time for learning, and they had some good ideas, so I thought I'd gather the ideas together and put them in a post. Originally it was a blog post, so I'll include the link to that blog post on the show notes, but it's also going to be a podcast now. I certainly don't miss that commute, but I know that some of these ideas are really good for other people, so I thought I would share them. And obviously the first one we've touched on is podcasts. So whether it's something for learning or whether it's something about your favourite team or your hobby or whatever it is, if you can find some good podcasts to listen to in English, then that would be a great way because you're already travelling to work, so you've already got that time is booked out in your calendar. But if you can do something at the same time, like listening to a podcast, then that's a great use of that time. And I know some of my students, one of them, she drives to work and she's found a podcast that's around the same length as her journey, so she can listen to an episode each way, or she doesn't have to do it every time, but if she wants to, maybe in the morning or something, then the podcast episodes last around the same time as her journey to work. So she quite likes that because it fits nicely within the time that she has. Some of my other students don't want to do that though. They don't want to be listening to something. I have one who likes to read on the bus, so she takes her Kindle with her on the journey to work, and she reads an English book on the bus. And also with the Kindle it's good because if there's a word that she doesn't know, she can use the inbuilt dictionary too, so she can follow the story, and also if there's something she doesn't know, then she can look it up without losing her place in the book. But equally, I know other people who want to have hard copy books, and so they just slip a book in their bag, and then it's not big, it's not heavy. They have it whenever they're waiting around or on the train or something like that. So you can also read a book. It doesn't have to be a podcast. One of my other customers enjoys, she's always got her phone with her anyway, so she puts apps on her phone. Vocabulary apps. There are so many. I wouldn't recommend some more than others. There are because I don't particularly use them, but I know that some of my other students think they're a great way to learn new vocabulary, and that kind of task can take as long as you want it to, or as much time as you have. So it's not like something with a book where you may think, oh, I really want to get to the end of this chapter. If you're using a vocabulary app, then you can take 5 minutes, you can take, I don't know, half an hour. It's up to you. And some of the apps record the words that you knew, the ones that were a problem for you, and they'll bring them up more frequently until you get to know them. So you can personalize them and with some apps you can add your own words, particularly if you're reading a book or working with particular text, then that's great because they're words that are relevant to you. And other ones, there are generated lists for the apps. So if you go to the show notes, there is more information about the apps that my students recommended, but there are many and people learn in different ways, so really the best idea is to try out a few if you want to learn that way and see what you like. So another thing that came up was social media, because a lot of the time people are on social media anyway, so Facebook or Twitter or things like that. And if you're already on the site and you've built in some feeds or some groups that are in English, they don't necessarily have to be about learning English, but it's good if they are in English, because then you're not having to go somewhere to look for content. It appears in your feed. And if you see an article about something that you think is interesting and it happens to be in English, then you're more likely to read it because it's there in front of you. You don't have to think, oh, I'm going to learn English now and I have to find a good article. You can just see this article that pops up on your Twitter feed or on your Facebook news list, and then you've got the choice of whether you want to read it or not. But if you do that, then you can start conversing with other people who are learning English too. There are loads of groups for learning English, and you're just building it into something again that you're already doing if you're already on the social media sites. And so many of them have apps now, like it's easy to use Twitter and Facebook on your phone, so you can carry them around with you. And the last one, we've already covered the idea of books, but if you want something a bit longer than a podcast, or if you want some fiction, then audiobooks are a great way to pass the time or to learn at the same time. So a lot of the audiobooks can be played. I play them on my iPhone. Some sites have their own apps, like I believe Audible has its own app, but others you can play just as if you download them from iTunes, for example, they can just be played on the iPhone, so you don't need another piece of equipment to play them. You can just listen to the book and it will keep your place. So for example, if you're driving, then obviously you can't read a physical book or start chatting to people on social media and reading articles, but the ideas with the podcast or the audiobooks would work because you can just play them in your car. And I also know one of my customers enjoys cycling as well, and takes sometimes podcasts, sometimes books with them, because they say they can listen to them while they're cycling and learn at the same time because they're not needing to look at something. So hopefully those ideas will give you some new inspiration about how you can use your journey to work. I know some people don't have a long journey to work, they can just get to their office quickly and easily, but for those who do, that can be a good time to learn some English, maybe in the morning or in the evening. Different people have different times when it's good for them to learn. I'm not a very good morning person, so I do work when I have to, but I know that I'm a lot more productive later in the day and I can absorb information better. But some people are really fresh and full of energy in the morning, so the morning would be a better time for them. But these are some ways, so you don't have to sit down and find extra time for English. If you can do any of these activities while you're travelling to work, it may help you to get that little bit more into your day. So if you have any comments about that, let me know, either on the show notes, englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, and then click on episode 2, or just send me an email. But I hope that was useful, and I'll speak with you again soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.